This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Lucha Undead Reborn, Season 7 or 8 at this point. Another episode in our ongoing series of Get to Know the PTBN PWO. We have a special guest today, a guy who I think I wouldn't be out of line as referring to as really the voice of the PTBN. We have JT Rosero.
How you doing, Timothy? Great to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you're... and like I said, in a lot of ways, you really are the voice of the entire PTBN side of things, just because you're on so many different podcasts, be it in production or as a host. You're also involved with, doing the drops, the ad drops. You're kind of the voice of that too. So you kind of come across as the main guy in that regard. Is that by design? Do they kind of want to put you forward as the personality of the whole thing, or did it all just kind of happen?
Yeah, the cream rises to the top. No, it's more of a, honestly, I think just because Scott and I kind of started everything, obviously with the podcast, and it just went from there. It just has always just been positioned that way. So the way I always kind of envision it is Scott and I are kind of the, not to say the founders, but without like Brad and Chad who came along, and we'll get to all this as the Place to Be Nation kind of grew out of the podcast. I look at the four of us as always kind of been the driving force of the site, everything behind it, the decision makers. And I think it's just that I love doing everything. So I don't mind doing the shows and doing the breaks. And it's a big creative outlet for me, as we'll talk about. So.
Yeah. Just like I said, it just seems like even with Scott on the show with you, it almost feels like he's insulated from a lot of other parts of the show. I mean, he does host main event and guests here and there, but it does feel like when it comes to the PTBN side of things, you're really all over the place. I mean, just on everything, doing the ad roll, the host of one of the main shows, online posting. I believe that's, I think, the next big question I've been trying to remember to always ask early on these shows is, are you now or have you ever been a member of the PWO board?
Oh, yes. I've been there for a while. I lurked for a while. Actually, I started with this whole, that family of message boards back with Death Valley Driver, probably like 2003, under the name Bigelow 34, which has been my name since on those boards. So I was Death Valley Driver for a long time. Then I was on Smart Marks, I think was the other one. And then I eventually stumbled across Pro Wrestling Only. And that's where I came across, I think that's where Parv found our show. And then he got me in touch with Chad. And that's what kind of got into all this. So I'm only solely active on PWO now. I'm still mainly lurking. I'll post here and there, but it's always open to my browser, whether it's home or at work, and I'm always, peeping out the threads there, and it's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of great friends that I've met through that board too. So.
All right, and you said it was Bigelow. Was it 83? 34. Okay, so I've seen the Bigelow. I know you're always posting the tend to be the shows that you're on the threads on there and having a few interactions here and there. Mainly, I guess, like you said, just reading and lurking. But that's interesting to hear. Like I said, a lot of times guys on the podcast network do the shows and then they don't reference what their name is on the board. So then you see people posting like, for the longest time, I didn't know Chad or Brad who they were on the board. So I would hear them on the podcast, or even you. I had kind of assumed that you were the Bigelow one, but I wasn't 100%. Never could be.
Well, it's funny too, because I always laughed early on when we started this because, obviously message board handles have been around forever. I mean, I was Bigelow 34 on, I think even AOL towards the end. But it's funny because I listened to like the early Where the Big Boys Play, and Parv is reading feedback, and I guess we did it too on the Place to Be. But he's like, and here's feedback from Shu. It was just like funny hearing like these fake names. I'm like, and then I'm glad eventually we've kind of just opened things up a bit, and even if they're some worked names, some real names, but it's to me it always added a little bit more. I don't want to say legitimacy, but it doesn't feel as targeted towards one audience when you don't do that. Like when you're doing a podcast and you're like, whatever RVD 75 says, it's like, okay, now you're speaking like right to this message board. So I thought it was great when a lot of these shows have opened up and started referring to either readers or feedback and actually use names. And it's become more of like it encourages more people to come forward versus like, okay, this podcast is solely for this message board.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point of this show to begin with. It's like, for me, as someone who came in, I wasn't around from the very beginning, so I'm like, who are these guys? You know, who's what? So that's where the idea came from. It was, oh, hey, you know, I'm confused. And I was kind of getting to know people and doing stuff here and there. And I was like, well, now I'm learning this stuff, but what good is it for just me to learn it? Which I think people have done 1,000 times, right? It's that idea. I guess it's not even that idea, but it's just like sharing the knowledge, sharing the information. So I was like, well, as I go through this journey and I learn all this stuff, why don't I spread it around so everyone can feel included and involved in our little community? Because I think that from everybody I've talked to, that seems to be the point of PTBN. I mean, for you, I don't know like what the main point is, or not even the main point, but I'll just have to ask you. I'll have to lead into the question this way. Like, for a lot of people, it seems like a big point of this is to grow a community, to have an outlet, to kind of put your takes out there, but also to reach out and, like you said, get listener feedback and this and that. Is that important to you? Is that a big part of this whole project?
Yeah. So I'm going to try and come up with a way of saying this where it's not to brag. I'm a guy that has always loved to have like a lot of friends. Like I have a huge amount of people that I consider friends, you know what I mean? Or pals, buddies, whether they're super close, relatively close. So when we started this, and Scott and I have, you know, met in 2003 at my old job, and we always just talk wrestling, and we'd be on the phone late at night back before I had kids, and, you know, my wife would pass out or whatever, or I'd work nights and I'd call him from work, and, you know, we'd be watching pay-per-views together, and eventually he started writing these like rudimentary reviews for like 4 or 5 of us. And I said, oh, this looks like fun. I'll get on it. So we started doing these pay-per-view reviews. Eventually we refreshed them. Eventually somehow we got them on Graham Cawthon's website, which I don't know how, but that was like a big break for us. So anyway, long story short, he was starting to do a web radio show for a buddy of his that started an internet radio station that he had worked in radio for a long time. And this friend said, oh, I'm going to try this out. And he did a sports show with Dr. G, and he did a wrestling show with his buddy Johnny. And he'd always tell me, like, you know, make sure you listen, give me your feedback. And I'm like, oh, you know, it's tough. I'm like, the show's airing you like Wednesday at 1:30. You know what I mean? So it's like, unless I can find a way at work to buy some time and listen, I felt bad not supporting him and hearing the show. And I'm talking to him like, Scott, you know, this was 2000, probably late 2010. And I was like, you know, podcasts are kind of catching on. They're on demand. And eventually I convinced him to move on to do the podcast for him. And I'm like, I'll do it with you. You know, I've been looking for a creative outlet outside of, you know, it's my day job or whatever. And, you know, as we started to build it up, one of our main goals out of the gate was to build a community. And part of it was to obviously meet friends and, you know, build up, you know, partnerships and friendships, but also to build an audience. And one of our goals was, you know, if we engage people, if we make them part of the show, they'll become loyal listeners. And it worked. I mean, the majority of our fans have been on since either, you know, month 1 or within the first year. And have been really dedicated, because I think a big part of it was early on, we'd read all that feedback. We'd mention their names. We'd invite them on the show. You know, we'd engage on the message board and then eventually social media. And it developed from there into being, like you said, a community and a group of friends. I mean, now we do these road trips to pay-per-views and we have these huge turnouts, and it's like unbelievable, you know? And it's like, and a lot of these guys I now consider like really close friends. Like Steve Willie is coming to my house, coming to Brooklyn with us for SummerSlam, and he's coming here first to hang out for a couple nights and stay at my house. And it's like, and I never would have thought, you know what I mean? Like I've known him forever from blogs and stuff, and now this has just taken a lot of his relationships to the next step. And you talk to older people, like, you know, I'll mention my parents, like, oh, my friend from the internet, and it sounds stupid, but that's just how it is these days. And I don't think we're alone in that. I see blogs and message boards all the time, but people meeting up and hanging out, and you spend so much time talking and planning and doing podcasts and everything else together that, you know, they become your really good friends. Like I talk to Brad and Chad more than anyone else probably in my day-to-day life. You know what I mean? Like we're constantly talking. And so yeah. So that was a long-winded answer to yes, it was meant to be a community originally to grow the show. And then as it grew and we realized how many great people were listening, we wanted to be friends with and meet up with and hang with. I mean, a guy like John D'Amato, I mean, he was just a guy, like, you know, listening to the show in episode 5, and now he's like one of my best friends. He's here, you know, he comes to visit me, you know, sometimes multiple times a month or whatever. He drives down and hangs out with my kids and everything else. So it's really, really cool what this is all brought about, something I never would have fathomed.
Yeah, and actually, John, that's one of the names, D'Amato, or is it D'Amato?
D'Amato, yeah.
Yeah, that's a name that I hear, and I brought this up when I was talking to actually Todd and Jordan. He's one of those names that you kind of hear bandied about on the podcast, but yet never heard him really produce anything or be on any shows, So what's kind of like you said, he started out as a fan, or he started out as someone that you just kind of met on message boards. What was the background there?
Yeah, a fan. I mean, he found our podcast through Graham Cawthon's site, started listening to it, and he's a diehard. He's a little older, so he's a diehard 70s, 80s WWF fan from New York City. So, went to MSG, saw a lot of shows there. Just a big time. That was his hotbed growing up. So when we were doing Vintage Vault reviews of that era, that hooked him in. And, he would provide feedback. And, early on when we would do like the episode 100 where we had people come on and give their memories, and he just started talking there. And then the big breakthrough there was when we went to WrestleMania 29. He helped organize a lot of the gathering of the tickets and the meetup and the tailgate, and that was our first real gathering of all our fans and listeners. And he's a super chill guy. So since then, we've got together for these trips where he'd always be involved, and then it just kind of evolved where I have a couple of parties every year, and I invited him to a couple of those, and they just kind of became, one of my inner circle group of friends. But he's been increasing his profile on the podcast. He's been on with me and Scott a couple of times now. He'll do all the holiday specials, and I think he did Aaron George's Crisscross. So he's starting to, and he's just main event a bunch in the sports show. So I think he's starting to branch out, but he's a guy that really went from just listener, and eventually we just worked him into the crew.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess I'm just not super familiar. I probably noticed him on shows here and there. But it is interesting when you talk about going through the eras as you guys have done the Vintage Vaults, because you're getting into an era where I had kind of almost completely checked out of WWE, so it's really interesting hearing it again, especially because with my younger brother, who's like, a decade younger than me, this was the time when he was almost completely all in. Like, this was probably some of his most, like, committed to pro wrestling times of his life, is the era that you guys are doing. So listening to your Vintage Vault rewinds right now, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of remember hearing about that while I was, completely obsessed with ROH and PWG and stuff from Japan and all these other promotions. And then so like, oh yeah, I kind of remember what was it, like John Morrison or CM Punk when he was starting to get. I remember hearing a lot about CM Punk, a guy that I had been a big fan of before that, like, oh, he's getting ruined in WWF and stuff like that. Right. And then meanwhile, I wasn't really watching it. I remember the first like Raw I paid attention to, and what had felt like years, was when I heard, oh, CM Punk won the title on Monday, and I was like, oh, I'll go back and watch it, So you guys are getting right into that area. So it's really interesting to hear these reviews of like stuff that I wasn't super familiar with, and then comparing kind of notes with my brother, being like, hey, do you remember this and this happening? And it's such a cool thing that you guys do these. Even, I mean, what was that? Like, you guys are in 2007, 2008 at this point, correct?
06. We just did SummerSlam 06.
Yeah, so you guys are just getting in there, and it's realistically a decade ago, but there's already kind of nostalgia building. I don't know if you feel that. I mean, as someone who was probably nostalgic for the WWE all the way back to the 80s and stuff like that, do you feel any nostalgia for stuff that was just 10 years ago at all when you're kind of re-reviewing it, or does it just seem like it just happened yesterday?
Yeah, both. So it's like, when I think about it, I'm like, oh man, we're catching up. And then I look at it, I'm like, no, we're like at our pace, we're years from catching up. I mean, decade probably from catching up. Just because of the way we slowed down. But yeah, it's a weird kind of nostalgia. Like, I don't ever get a hankering to watch like 2006. So when I think nostalgia, I think like a craving in a way, like, oh, I'm really craving like 1994 WWF, you know what I mean? Or something like that, like where that was where my heart was growing up. 06, it's almost more of a curiosity. Because I've never stopped watching. I've always watched. In 06, I was watching pretty steadily too. But it's a weird, like, I guess, lack of familiarity kind of nostalgia. So it's like, was this stuff as bad as we're led to believe, or is there some good in here? And Scott and I's tact have always been, two things. Let's watch it with an open mind and look for the positives. And then if it's a bad show, we're going to blow out the podcast and try and like goof around and have a lot of fun with it. And that's kind of the two avenues we take. But 06 hasn't been as bad as I remembered. And the interesting thing with doing the Vintage Vaults, just going pay-per-view to pay-per-view, is we're not slogging through the TV. You know what I mean? I think during that era, a lot of and I think you get that now, a lot of like the getting worn out by the product is that every week watching the TV. Whereas if you're just kind of bouncing in once a month for these pay-per-views, there's like enough good matches in there to not ever make it like, oh God, I just wasted 3 hours of my night or week, however long it takes me to get through it. So it's kind of a morbid curiosity versus nostalgia for this era.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at, or why I've never gotten burnt out. I pretty openly talk about it. I've never have been, probably never will be a hardcore WWF fan. And my biggest commitment to WWF ever was probably very late 90s, early 2000s. And it was like, maybe I would watch Raw and the pay-per-views, and that was it. I was never the watch every little bit of everything you can WWF. Meanwhile, WCW, ECW, I was fully invested in. So when those two companies disappeared, I was kind of checked out myself of not wrestling, but mainstream wrestling, that's for sure. So that's why for me, when I hear a lot of people rip apart, or the 2006, 2007 WWF, I'm kind of like, it wasn't that bad, but maybe it was because I wasn't watching the Raw and I wasn't seeing, the blatant kiss my ass club stuff, or I don't even know what was really going on that was so terrible on the TV there, other than just, I guess, boring, same matches and stuff like that. You did quickly mention kind of when you got involved with Brad and Chad, which when I talked to Chad, that came up a little bit, but we didn't get fully into it, and it's kind of interesting to me. It came up slightly here when I spoke with Chad about kind of the formation of the core four, he referred to it, and like how you guys got introduced, but you mentioned that it was kind of in a conduit by way through Parv, which is interesting to me. So you were doing, or was it Scott was doing an internet radio show, correct?
Yeah, he had just started it back up. So like I said, he was in radio for a long time. Switched careers. We worked at a TV post-production facility in Stamford, Connecticut. And that's where we met, just kind of talking. I don't even know how we stumbled into talking wrestling together one day. And that's it. We just became close friends from there. And he'd always talked about wanting to like kind of get back into radio kind of stuff. And his friend started up that internet station, and he relaunched the sports show, like I said, with G, and then the wrestling show, which was Main Event, he called it at the time. Then too, and that's when we started talking, and I was a guest on that show a couple times, and I just was like, it's just podcasts are it, man. Like it's, if you want an audience, podcasts are gonna be way better than this internet radio that is on just random times during the week. And I finally got him to agree, and that's where we started from there. So I think Parv was listening. I'm not sure when. I'm trying to remember when he reached out. My daughter was born, so it had to be about a year in. She was pretty young. So he reached out to us, as a fan of the show, and he had mentioned that we had kind of inspired him to start doing the same for WCW shows. And I think him and Chad just started doing the show, kind of they didn't know each other. They just started doing the show. And Parv reached out to me one time and just asked if Scott and I wanted to join them. And I believe, I can't believe I'm forgetting, I think it was Starrcade 88. Or Bash. It was one of the Flair Luger ones. And so we went on with them, and that's the first time I ever spoke with Chad. And then, we had a lot in common, Chad and I, so we just started talking a lot just on Facebook Messenger, like every night, just getting to know each other. I mean, we'd just chat on and off pretty much every evening. Hey, what are you up to tonight? And we found out we had a lot in common, whether it was TV watching, the wrestling stuff, sports. He was starting his family around the time I was getting ready to have my second child. So we kind of grew together through a lot of stuff. Brad, so Chad was around for maybe like half a year. Him and I were friends, and Brad had started commenting on Scott Keith's blog of Doom. He was posting there, and he started commenting on some of our stuff, like I'd post our podcast and our reviews there. And I had started to plug our WrestleMania 29 trip, and Chad, I've been dragging his feet because he was didn't know if he could, basically swing the money and about somewhere to stay. So I convinced him finally to give in and come. I offered, for him to stay in our room. I said, you can, crash for free or whatever. And so finally he broke down. He came, and that was where I first met Chad. And we had an awesome weekend. We bonded. We roomed together. So that was kind of our big coming together moment. And then Brad, like the week before 29, messaged me. I think it was on Keith's blog, and then I think it was on Twitter. He messaged me and said, "Oh, I'm going to be at the tailgate with my buddies. You care if I stop by?" I was like, "No, whatever. Come by and say hi." And I joke about this all the time with him. I don't remember meeting him at the tailgate. I know Chad remembers talking to him, but I was pretty buzzed, and there was like so many people there. I remember like vaguely shaking his hand or whatever, but I'm pretty sure I blew him off. That's what he'll tell you. But he'll also say he big timed me because it makes him feel better. But so then a couple weeks later, Scott and I just kind of on a whim mentioned that we'd like to start a website on one of the episodes. And he reached out to me because he had experience building websites. And he just, like, cold reached out to me. I don't know if it was on Keith's blog or PWO somewhere. And I was like, sure, let's go for it. And then we started talking on Facebook. And that was early April 13, and we launched June 1st 13. So it happened pretty quick, and we became pretty quick friends from there too.
Okay, so from the beginning, you and Scott were doing a podcast. Was it called the Place to Be podcast even at the time then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So obviously, big Seinfeld fan, and here's a plug for you. So we're doing a Seinfeld rewatch series, and that episode that spawned the Place to Be saying is our next one that we're going to be reviewing in season 7. But anyway, I don't know if you're a Seinfeld guy, but that was Frank Costanza's little man cave that he had, the pool room, and he called it the Place to Be. And there was this, I don't know, that name always stuck with me. And when we started our message board, like back in 2007, we called it the Place to Be. So over the years, that just kind of became the thing, and we said, we're going to do the podcast. We're doing reviews that are also on the Place to Be message board, so Place to Be podcast. We were doing the Place to Be podcast for about 2 years. February 11 we started, so it was about a little over almost 2.5 years before we started the website, and that was the only show. Like, there were all these other shows that are on now on the network all came after we started the website, or existed and then became part of the site. But Scott and I, that's all we did for 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Where the Big Boys play was already going on.
Yes.
And then they kind of joined in. And I guess I'll get into more of that with probably some other guests as we start to talk timeline for other shows that join. Probably talk to people who are hosts of other shows as they do that. But one show where I probably won't get to talk to the host ever because he's just such a big-time celebrity is the short-lived Steve Carino show that was on the network.
I thought you were going to say Richard and the Mailman.
Richard and the Mailman, is that gone too?
Yeah, probably.
I think I listened to like maybe 3.5 episodes.
They weren't bad.
I liked it.
That's a show I wish happened like 15 years ago when Jeff and Josh were like really good friends. They've had some issues. So they kind of killed off their chemistry, and then Josh moved and things kind of fell apart from them, but they, that's a whole other story, but I know those guys forever, and two of my best friends, and their chemistry, like, before that was unbelievable. Like, if they were doing podcasts in, 2004, they probably would have been phenomenal, but by that point, there was just too much baggage by the time we got to getting them on air. Yeah,
because I do remember liking what I heard from that, but I think it was at a time where I was like voraciously listening to only wrestling podcasts.
Right.
And so because they talked about anything other than wrestling for even a moment,
yes.
I kind of would get bored and get checked out. But now my podcast kind of milieu is a little bit more diverse. I could probably stand to have that show back. But I did mention the ill-fated podcast with the King of Old School. But that's going to be a little teaser as we're going to go ahead and listen to some advertisements, some plugs for some other shows on the PTBN Podcast Network.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
What's up, everybody? This is Kevin Kelly. Make sure you check out every episode of The Kevin Kelly Show right here on the Place to Be Nation. PlaceToBeNation.com. The Kevin Kelly Show. Every episode is a winner. At least we hope.
Place to Be Nation's Justin Rosero here. In addition to the Kevin Kelly Show, we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. And we now offer them to you on 2 great feeds as well. On the Place to Be podcast feed, you can check out Scott Friscolo and me on the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, with our famous Vintage Vault pay-per-view reviews. PTBN also covers current day wrestling with Clotheslines and Headlines, Main Event, Mission Indie Possible, in our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows with immediate feedback on WWE, NXT, and Ring of Honor Super shows. Relive wrestling's past with our monthly pay-per-view rewind series led by Ben Morse and the Dangerous Alliance Wrestling podcast as we dive into various subjects in the form of exercises and games. We also have sports covered too with the Sports Lounge, the TJ McClune Show, and NBA Team Podcast. On our brand new PTB Pop podcast feed, we offer great shows such as the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, Rank and File, Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with the hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversation, and Imaginary Stories. Subscribe to both feeds on iTunes and be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows are available on PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus tournaments and more. Be sure to check out on the right-hand side of the site for details on how to support the site when you shop at Amazon and download our free Place to Be Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and Scott Keats' blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
All right, so I got the hook laid. Everyone's so excited to hear about this, the backstage dirt. Everyone, I guess there was a little bit of it kind of going around, but I never heard it really get discussed too much. How much were you involved with kind of everything that happened with Steve Corino? I know I listened to his show with Rob Dimension. There was a podcast before he was even on the PTBN network, and then that show was, kind of short-lived. And then I heard I actually enjoyed it, and then I heard, he's coming back with another show, and Rob's going to be involved somewhat here and there. And then he was on pretty much every show, and the show was just gone. And then lo and behold, out of nowhere, he's on the MLW network, and kind of what happened there. What was the issue?
So I will cover this by saying, really nice guy. Like nothing that went down, I don't think was ever done anything malicious. I think Steve's just a guy that is a pro wrestler, and pro wrestlers I don't think are great at keeping commitments. I think they're great at getting frustrated with things and moving on to the next thing before maybe putting a bow on the previous thing. So he came on, obviously, so we met Kevin Kelly through my friend John Walters and grew that relationship. And then Kevin got us in touch with Corino, and Corino came on for an interview with me and Scott. And we had talked to him. We knew he had done the podcast before. And, I kind of gave out feelers because we're trying to grow the network. And, hey, Steve, what do you think about, doing a show? We can do bi-weekly. That's how Kevin does it. It works well. You're not getting burnt out. Yeah, that's great, guys. I'd love to do a show. I've been really interested. Hey, Steve, that's great. We'll do all the producing. You don't have to do a thing. Show up every other week. We'll get you a producer, Dan McGinn, and, do your thing. No, I'm going to do it every week. I have all these great ideas. We're like, you sure you want to do every week? You're not going to get burnt out. You're not going to, it's a lot. No, I want to do every week. I'll do every week. So, all right. So we eventually built up. We got everything going. It was, a good chance for Dan to get some shine. I thought he was really good on the show. I thought they had good banter and good interplay. And it didn't take long before Steve started getting kind of frustrated with, I think, having a hard time getting guests or the weekly grind of coming up with ideas and being unique. And, he had, I think there was a little bit of frustration on his end too, because I was just giving some feedback. We all were. And I think he thought we were like kind of telling him what to do a little bit. So I think he got frustrated with that, which is fine. And then he just one day basically like told Dan, like, I'm not gonna be able to do this week. And then Dan didn't hear from him. Like that was it. So it just kind of ended. Like we just never heard from Steve. And then I don't know, it was like a few months later, Steve reached out through Dan and said, hey, I'm thinking of restarting the Extreme Odd Couple podcast with Rob. I'll kind of be rejuvenated. We'll do things a little bit differently. The pressure won't be on as much. We'll do it every other week. Great. We love Steve. Welcome back. We're happy to have you back. We're back on good terms. Dan's back in the mix. And they did like 2 episodes. And I don't know if they had problems, but it was like the day of like week 3, like Steve just out of the blue, like bagged the episode and then just kind of went quiet. And we never really heard anything from him. And then, like Dan reached out a couple times, never really heard anything back. Rob just kind of disappeared as well. And then we heard the announcement that he went to MLW. So I was like, all right, I didn't care that he kind of bagged us. And I don't even care if he went because we don't pay. I mean, I don't make any money. Like no one makes money from this. We're doing this out of, the enjoyment of doing it. And that's why I always praised Kevin. I mean, we're on a hiatus right now because he's so busy with New Japan and stuff. But this is a guy, he was doing this for fun. And he went, a good 2 years solid, not missing an episode. And, so I don't begrudge anyone. I mean, we're not paying. We don't get paid. So when he went to MLW, I'm like, good for you. Steve, if you can get paid, go do your thing. What bugs me is that he never came to us and said anything. And I finally asked Kevin, I said, can you just talk to Steve and see what the hell happened? Like, what is the problem? And, when I'm told, he basically admitted that, he felt bad that he didn't reach out and he never did. I mean, he never wrote to say anything. And it's fine. Like, we're cool. We made sure we talked to him when he had a surgery, and I'm still a big fan of his work. I think he does a great job. His feud with BJ Whitmer was awesome. He does a good job of commentary still. So there's no hard feelings. I feel bad for Dan, because he really enjoyed doing the show. And I just wish, Steve was a little more kind of forthcoming with everything that was going on, especially because we weren't paying him, but we were doing a lot of work, and we were carving out schedules, and then he'd cancel, or there was a no-show once, and it's like, Dan's sitting around, I'm sitting around, sometimes I'd back up record, and I got stuff going on. It's like, I don't mind doing it, but I also don't like sitting around and then just I think there was at least one no-show where we just never heard anything. So like that kind of stuff is what bugged me. And then to not at least say, hey guys, I'm sorry about everything that went down. Just to let you know, MLW reached out. They're offering to pay me to do this podcast. Like, I'm never going to say, fuck you, don't go get paid. I mean, that's stupid. He's a pro wrestler, and that's a big paying thing right now for pro wrestlers. Like, go get money. Like, I don't care. But at least, I thought we were at least acquaintances to the point where he would have said, or at least sent a message to Kevin if he wasn't going to reach out to us. But I think Steve's just said, as much as he comes off on TV as a confrontational guy, I think in real life he's just not a confrontational guy. So I don't know if he thought we'd be mad or anything. But so that's it. That's pretty much the whole story. There's not much more behind it. Again, he was a good guy anytime we talked. Really nice. Always complimentary of the show, of the work we did on the show. Always asked how the family. He was always really nice. He made Dan feel like a friend. But it just kind of, I didn't really appreciate how it all ended. That's all.
Okay. I mean, that's probably pretty close to what I expected. I just, like I said, I thought it was funny that he kind of showed up and then ended up kind of rebooting the old podcast that they stopped doing, for a reason. It's kind of like dating the same girl again or whatever. It's like, you guys broke up once. What makes you think it's going to work the second time?
Right. It took like 3 weeks and they were having a fight or something. It's like, we can't do the show. They gave some weird reason, and then we just never heard anything again. I'm like, so I think they're fine now because they seem to talk again on social media, but I think we definitely got caught up in some issue between them early into the Odd Couple reboot.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes you're good friends, but you can't collaborate. It's just kind of how it works, and that's nothing to. You got to just know what to accept and all that. But speaking of,
if I could just do that over, I would have just told them. I would have been more stern with the not doing weekly. I knew, and Brad said it too. Like, we just knew he was going to get burnt. It's tough. It's a tough schedule, especially when you're doing everything else he's doing. Like, when you're traveling all the time, it's going to become a job. And like, that's partly why Scott and I scaled back a bit. I mean, we went. I want to say a good 3 years. We were doing 2 a week. I mean, and that's a lot of audio to be churning out. And I never minded it. And then eventually, as we branched out with Kevin and other stuff, we scaled back a bit. But I just knew it was going to be too much for him. And that's when Kevin started us as to either once a month or twice a month. We don't need to do every week with a show like that, unless it's your main job. Steve Austin does 2 a week because that's his job. I mean, that's what he does now. You know what I mean? But like Steve Carino's still doing commentary, still trains, he still runs his own promotion. Where are you fitting in, even if it's only an hour a week? It's, he's got a baby. There's like a lot. So that was my concern, and it kind of came to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does make sense. But I was going to say, speaking of collaborating with buddies or buddies that you collaborate with, I was going to talk about Dan McGinn because he was great on that show. I think that was like the only show, I mean, it was the first show that he was on, but he really shined on there. And his personality came through. He seemed to build up a good rapport with Steve. I like hearing him chime in every now and then on the Dangerous Alliance podcast, but it was just like, I wish that guy could find another vehicle to kind of have like just a quick conversation. But where did he come from? That's, I guess, my question. He seems like he's close with you. Seems like you guys are friendly. Was he one of your friends, or did he just come around as a fan as well?
Yes, he was a fan. So he would send us emails every now and then. I think it was after the site started. He used to love when I'd play like Color Me Bad or stuff like that on who's the other band? I'm drawing a blank real quick. New Jack Swing, some to Color Me Bad.
God. I'm
drawing a blank. Anyway, there's a couple bands like that. All for One, not All for One. Who the hell's the other one I'm trying to think of? Fuck, it's gonna drive me nuts. Oh my god. Anyway, I'll think of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to help you here. Sorry.
They just had like an album come out like 2 years ago because I made them download the whole thing. It would not Call Me Bad. It's fuck. All right. Anyway, so he would always message me when I used that as the opener ending music because every episode I try and use a different song, and so we just started talking like via email and stuff. And I was having a party coming up, and the mystical Derek LaRue was coming down to this. I always have a night after Thanksgiving party, and I told Dan, I'm like, Derek lives near you. Why don't you tag along and come down? We can meet and come to the party and hang out. So we met that night, and then a few weeks later, we used to go to Picasso's Pizza to watch pay-per-views before we had the network, and we watched, I think it was like TLC 13 And we just started talking from them. I mean, from there, we're both same age, grew up fans of wrestling in the same way. So we kind of had a lot in common, and just another one like D'Amato almost, where we just started hanging out more and more. He's local, so it was only like about 40 minutes away from me. So we just hung out a lot. He comes on a lot of the trips too, and he's been by, hung out at my house, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty simple with McGinn. We just became friends. Him as a fan, and then we started talking and brought him into the fold with the website, and started doing some of the podcast stuff as a guest. And then he was one of my choices for Carino, because I do think he is good. I thought he was really good on Carino's show. And I like, and he's good with Dangerous Alliance too. So
I got to get him back somewhere where he can play a little bit more of a, I guess, starring role or not a star, but more of a supporting character. As a producer on Dangerous Alliance, like I said, I think he's underutilized. So we were supposed to get into a lot of stuff about you, but I feel like we've essentially talked about PWO stuff this whole time, so I'm going to once again tease after we go to our last break here. I'm going to try to jam pack some deep what's behind the microphone for JT. So we'll go ahead and listen to a few more ads, a few more plugs. This one's probably going to be more about the PWO side of things, where my fantastic other podcast is at.
This is Parv, and I'm here to tell you to listen and subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Only Place to Be Nation podcast network. That's the PWO PTBN podcast network, where you'll find a ton of in-depth shows done by hardcore fans. We've got Chris Zellner's 1-2 punch of Exile on Bad Street, and with David Bixenspan, a smash hit Between the Sheets. We've got Wrestling Culture with Dylan Hales and Dave Musgrave, Goodwill Wrestling and the reaction shows with Good Old Will from Texas. We got This Week in Wrestling with my man Pete and Johnny Sorrow, Stephen Graham and Tim Livingston's Pro Wrestling Super Show, Tag Teams Back Again with Kelly and Marty Sleaze, and a ton of other great shows too. And of course there's Titans of Wrestling and Where the Big Boys Play with yours truly and some dude from down south called Chad. PWO PTBN Podcast Network.
All right, JT, so we're back, and we're doing kind of a combination lightning round, get to know us kind of thing here. So we were talking earlier a little bit online. I am very professional and do my research, and I come to find out, essentially, big shocker, another guy who writes a Rewind review special about Seinfeld. You're a big fan of television. Did that come from growing up? Were you one of these kids who stayed home and watched a lot of TV? You seem to me like you may have been someone who was out playing sports and all this. Where'd the passion for TV come from?
God. Yeah, I think it was a hybrid. My family is one that, as you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s, TV was very different than it is these days. So, not everyone had multiple TVs. Not everyone had cable. Not everyone had all these different channels. And, one sec, you're gonna have to edit this. Sorry, been battling the chest cold here. So not everyone had, all those options about them, but for whatever reason, we always had like a TV in almost every room. We had cable from as far as I remember. I had a mini friggin' little 10-inch TV in my bedroom that eventually grew to a bit of a bigger one. And getting into wrestling early was really the first, I guess, major TV thing I remember, being appointment. I remember a little bit of some shows in the late 80s, like Golden Girls and Amen, stuff like that, watching on Friday nights. And, I was active. I did play a lot of sports. We had a really big backyard growing up, so we were always out there playing wiffle ball and stuff. And I had a basketball hoop. And, but part of it too was I went to elementary school in a different city than where I lived, because the local public schools were pretty shitty where I was. So I went to a Catholic school, that was, maybe 20 minutes away from my house. So a lot of my friends from school weren't local to me at all. So I would see them at school, but to get together was a weekend thing. I'd have to go get dropped off, or they'd come to my house. So I could never I didn't have a lot of neighborhood kids until I met Josh Richer, when I was 13. So a lot of my time was either spent on the phone with some of my friends, or just hanging out with my sister and watching TV or whatever. So, I got into 90210 really early, so I was a diehard fan of 90210. I got into Seinfeld actually a little bit late. I don't think I started watching until season 6 regularly, but then I went back and taped all the repeats and all the season 8, 7, 8, 9. So I used to just pour through the tapes, and eventually I pretty much almost had every episode on tape. And was always religious with taping everything. I still have wrestling tapes from 91, 92, 93, just VHSs in a bin in my closet. So very religious about that. And a lot of that I credit to my cousin Matt, who got me into wrestling, and he was big on that too. And he was also really big on, videotaping and being creative on that level. So like in 92, 93, we started doing a lot of home videos. As many of the fans of the show know, like we did Backyard Wrestling, we did a whole podcast about it. But also there's other random stuff too. We do like mini movies, mini TV shows. And I did that almost right through all of high school and into college. And then when I went to college, I went to college for TV. And I was always very interested in the medium and making TV, being creative. And I ran the news station my senior year. So just always looking for that outlet to record something, as well as being a fan of watching TV. And my wife now too was a big TV fan as well. So, we try and balance it. I still play basketball and try and work out where I can and stuff. But TV obviously much more, accessible now than it was then. But yeah, I've always been a fan, pretty much. More TV even than movies. Like I like movies, but TV shows have always been like I'd prefer to get into a good TV show versus just like watch a movie at night.
Yeah, I get that same thing, and I came in on the tail end of it. And by that I mean as you talking right now, because I was like fading in and out of paying attention. No, I'm kidding. I came into the tail end of when you like couldn't just have everything. I don't know if you may be a little bit, you're slightly older than me. We'll just put that out there. It's not disrespectful or anything, but it's just the truth.
No, it's okay. I lob enough old jokes out at others, so it's okay. I can take it.
Yeah. And I came in really at the tail end where taping something was a thing where, like you said, taping the reruns of Seinfeld. Now, my younger brother, that's ridiculous because all you do is you go online and download it, or God forbid, go to a record store or Best Buy and buy the box set DVD of it. But I kind of remember being like, having taped episodes of like The Simpsons, where it's like I got season 3 episode 4, 5, and 6. I've also got season 6,
right.
12, 11, and you got all these holes, and you can't just watch everything and be completist. And there was something nice about that, where these shows back then you could just pop into whenever you felt like it, and I kind of get it. It's this and that going on, but it's just constantly the same thing. And now with TV shows being treated like an overarching story from beginning to end of each season, it's turning into like my whole point of why I liked TV more than movies to begin with, which was it was less of a commitment. It's a quick half hour. If I enjoy it, I don't. If I enjoy it, good. If I don't, then it's a quick 20 minutes. I didn't waste my time. I didn't commit too much time to it. Now TV shows are turning into even more of a commitment than movies.
Epics. Yeah, they're epics. And it's funny too, because a big part of it was syndication. Right. So, you turn on like TBS and my dad would watch friggin' Beverly Hillbillies or whatever, or I watched like Saved by the Bell or, whatever was on in the evenings on TBS, very shows that you didn't need to know anything about to tune on and watch. Beverly Hillbillies, Andy Griffith, like all that kind of stuff. That was all heavy syndication. And even the sitcoms of the day, like Friends and stuff. You had to know the arcs, but like you said, you could just jump in at any point, pick them up, Cheers and Frasier and all that stuff. And they weren't built as, an alternative to movies, whereas now it's a viable alternative. Like then it was like TV was looked at as a rung down, like, oh, you're doing TV. Now like major movie stars want to do TV series. It's a prestige thing versus before where it was like, that's where you slum it when you can't get a movie. Yeah, no. And
as you say that, it's funny. I remember, I think it was my uncle, and he was laid off of work one summer, and I was kind of going and hanging out with him, and it would be like, Bonanza would come on in the afternoon, and he was big into it, and he'd watch, I'm going to watch Bonanza. And they would play 2 episodes back to back. And this is how much syndication they really didn't give a fuck about the story of a TV show going in order. The episode at 5 o'clock was one episode, and then the episode at 5:30 would be from like a completely different season. And he's kind of like, I'm only following the story the episode's playing at 5. So he would turn it off after the first episode, and you're just kind of like, what? Why would you play a totally random episode right afterwards? But that's the way they treated TV shows back then, Yeah,
they'd have like these 2 different arcs going at once. It was really weird.
Yeah, so you mentioned that though, and filming, and when we were talking earlier as well, you mentioned kind of home movies and videos, and so I'm guessing you got a home camera pretty early on when you were younger.
Yeah, my cousin worked for Sony in Germany. My aunt had moved to Germany when I was younger, or actually, I don't know, maybe before I was even born. And he came home on one visit and brought it, and probably like 1988, 89. So my dad would always record family parties and gatherings. So I have like VHSs of like Christmas '88 and stuff like in my closet. And then once I kind of got the gall to ask him to use it, was probably around like I said, like 92. And just right away we were into it. We loved doing it. Even if it was like a 10-minute short, anything, we were just, if we had some free time, we had a couple of us, we'd film something. And I have a lot of it still. Like I was telling you, like we'll still have gatherings like once a year or twice a year, whoever can make it down, and we'll just like watch. We have like this compilation tape of all our stuff, and we'll just watch it and drink and have laughs at it, and it's cool because it's a bond for a lot of us that we did, and a lot of tons of inside jokes and whatnot, and it really was, when that went away from me after college, it was a rough time. It was like a rough 4 or 5 years, especially once I left TV. Without having that outlet to do. And like we'd watch, that's when we really started watching it more again, because it's like, I miss doing it. And, when you're 27, you're not going to go out and film stuff. It was just kind of weird. So you're like, I was in this spot of like, what do we do? What do I do with all this creative energy? And I was using a lot of it on the message boards, and, you're doing the role playing federations and all that stuff, the territory wars that we have. So, you're getting some of it out in writing, but this is like what I was missing. So when the podcast came along, it was like, oh, this is what I've been missing. And that's why we try to always do more than just like reviews. Like we've always tried to do bits, and whether they land or not, I never cared. Like that's always been my mentality. I was always one in school to sacrifice grades for quality of the show, because I'm like, I don't care if I'm supposed to do a 7-minute movie and this is 15 and I'm going to get a B instead of an A, because I'd rather have a 15-minute movie to watch like over the next few years or for the rest of my life, instead of like complying and getting a grade. So I almost look at the podcast the same way. Like, I'm not getting paid. I know our ceiling with listeners. I get, what it is. So I'm here to entertain who our fans are and entertain myself and Scott. And if we do goofy shit that doesn't hit, like I know there are people that love the Vince stuff and people that despise it. So like whatever, but we'll do it. So and even like the Christmas stuff, like to me that is like the real creative outlet where we get to work those bits in and just get to do different stuff. And to me that really replaced what I did all my life growing up for like 10 years with these videos, and whether it was in high school, college, or just at home. To not have that outlet anymore was rough for a few years, and to get it back with the podcast was great. And Scott was so good because he was such a pro. And if you listen, I don't know when you started listening, but if you go back and listen to those first like handful, I'm terrible. I mean, I can't believe like anyone listens. You know what I mean? Like I'm shocked because I sound like I'm breaking down in tears in the first few, trying to just gut my way through it. And then he guided us a lot early on. And of course he plateaued and I kept going on looking, but he, we grew together, and, I think he got the feel of the difference because he was very radio-y in the beginning too, like resetting the topic a lot, and just doing a lot of radio ticks that he had to break his self out of, and really us both working on not, and pausing, and like that. We've really worked hard on that kind of stuff, and that's kept me motivated to keep, doing this and keep going. And it's been big for me within my life to have this again, because my job that I'm in now is very just bland day to day. I'm there, to support my family. It's a great job, great paying job and everything. But this is like, this stuff has really saved me creatively from just like wanting to put my head through a wall.
Yeah. And I totally relate to you. It did so many sketches and stand up and podcasts and all this stuff. A lot of times where the point was, how ridiculous can this be? How stupid can this thing go? One of my favorite all-time kind of sketch videos that we did was I set up the whole thing. The name of the sketch was even Some Like It Hot. Set up the whole thing where I'm asking my friend if he'll dress up like a girl to be my date to a party so I don't have to go stag and look like a loser. Go through everything. Then we finally get to the reveal. He's in the bathtub. They're playing Dude Looks Like a Lady. The camera's panning up from his feet to the top, and then he just looks at the camera still dressed as a guy and goes, I'm not doing it. And that's the whole fucking joke, is that I spent the whole time setting up like you're going to see a guy dressed like a woman. It just never happens. And to me, that's hilarious. But a lot of people are like, why did you just waste 15 minutes? You know what I mean? Why did you just do this?
Like, why not? Or even 15 minutes. Like, we would record like 9 hours, because back in the day when nobody really knew what we were doing, I was like 16, or like a 7-hour recording day for like a 48-minute thing. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
This grind. And like my parents, I never told, like I kind of knew, but they'd be out during the day. And if I ever, like one day, when I'm really ready, I'm just going to go over there, like, with these volumes of shit. Like, here's what went on every day in your house, and like, fucking, my buddy Jim drove down and we recorded this ridiculous show, like all this nonsense. And, it's crazy to think, because it was such I was a huge fan. So speaking of TV, a huge fan of like public access. Like, I mean, I'd watch it religiously, and we had a pretty robust public access offering here in Rhode Island. And I loved, they had some backyard wrestling and other, local wrestling, and then guys that would just go around walking around the street. And it was such a, like this, it was like bigger than life to me. Like it was like unbelievable. You could just do this shit yourself and get it on TV. So our goal when we started doing the backyard wrestling was to get it on public access, and we just never did. But it's crazy for me to think of like what I could do now and just let the world see it on YouTube. Like we were doing all this stuff like for nobody, you know what I mean? Like from 1992 to 2000, whatever, like just for ourselves, like for 9 people that have seen it lifetime. And to think like, if I did this now, like what could it have been? Like could everything have been different? You know what I mean? Like would it have gotten noticed, or maybe not, but at least it would be out there and people would have seen it. And it's just crazy to think the difference just like a decade made with anyone who was doing the stuff like we were doing versus how they do it now. And even the backyard wrestling, like we were doing it before it really exploded and became, like we never did the hardcore stuff or anything like that. We were more into like characters and storylines. But it's crazy to think like all of a sudden this was like a huge phenomenon in the Attitude Era, and we were doing this shit on like a real cheesy, corny level, 5 years earlier. It's just, it always like kind of boggles my mind. Like, oh man, like what if I come around 10 years later? You know what I mean? Like what could we have done with the YouTube, iPhone? You don't need equipment. I was working off a video camera with a tape deck and a 1-wire, you know what I mean? Like that was my mixing, and it's crazy to think now, like all the tools we have and Pro Tools and everything else that you have at your fingertips. It's nuts. It's just nuts to me that, and in a way I'm glad I did it the way I did, because I feel like I learned a lot having to do it that way. Even in college, when I took editing classes, I learned on all the old equipment for most of my time before they rolled out the newer like digital stuff. So it was a nice background to have. I feel like it's helped me a lot. But it's just weird to think how things could have maybe been different.
Yeah, no, and I was having a conversation with that the other day about the stuff that's going to miss that jump from the analog to the digital, and just how there's just this sea of VHS tapes and CDs and all this that may be the last of that recording or that thing. I mean, I did backyard wrestling too, and I think one time I saw one video on YouTube, but everything else that was recorded, a lot of it was recorded, is just going to be gone. So right. My point being, you got to get those home movies somehow uploaded to YouTube. You got to get that converted to digital. The world needs to see this.
They're on DVD now. I have like everything. Okay. I spent the last year, I finally bought a DVD burner and like an idiot, right? So I did it like 2 years ago. And at first I did all my home movie stuff because I'm like, eventually I have like 7 VCRs floating around this house somewhere, just like that I've accumulated, because I'm like so paranoid that eventually they're all going to die, and the new ones are all shit and I don't trust them. Like I don't trust going to buy a new VCR right now, if they even sell them anywhere. Because like they just make them to die. Like the best ones I have are from like 1997. You know what I mean? Like those things don't die. So anyway, before I sound like a real fucking moron, I converted a lot of it to DVD and just so I'd have it preserved. And there are a couple things I've uploaded to personal YouTube. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go public fully with it yet. Maybe someday, but I will am very open to sharing with you now that we're friends and talked on the show. At the very least, the backyard wrestling stuff, if you really want to see it. And I know Chad Campbell's probably rolling his eyes because he came over and him and I watched some of it, and Chad, he's got the ridiculously high standards of wrestling, so to him it's all garbage. But I like
critiquing your backyard wrestling.
Oh yeah, I don't work on the arm, like a fucking nonsense. Like give me a break. It's Max Flyer versus Sexy Steve to me will always be a 5-star match, no matter what anyone says. But it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, sometimes it's the moves you don't see that are really telling the story of the match.
It's psychology. So here you go. So we told a story in the podcast we did, but I'll give a brief form here. 3 years before Montreal, we originated the screw job of West Warwick in my backyard. It was our first major event. We had just built this promotion. We had always done it in my basement. We had built up this WCF, and eventually we started recording it. And my cousin, who I mentioned before, was really into it, and he was going to win the world title from Josh Richer on the first big show. And the night before, me and Josh were in my basement. We're like, it'd be really cool if you get the belt, and we built to a bigger match, and then he won it. But we knew he wouldn't go for it because he was such a mark for himself. So he's not going to say yes. So we're kind of like, well, what if we fuck with him and we just screw him over? So at the end of the match, everyone knew what was going on. The referee, everyone there except for my cousin. I mean, this is really douchey. But everyone was there except for my cousin knew. And we have one of the guys that was doing commentary run in. The referee calls for disqualification. Me and Josh book it to the back, and my cousin just flips out on camera. We have it on camera, him just like melting down over not winning. And I swear to God, our relationship was like never the same after that. It was like he still did WCF for a while, and we get together here and there now, but we were like super close, and we was never the same after that. I don't think he ever trusted me again.
His heart wasn't in it.
It wasn't. His heart was not in it. It was funny because the night of the screw job, I called my friend Jim. I'm like, could you believe this just happened? I'm like, this is what we did like 3 years earlier. And it was always like this thing. I'm like, we friggin' screwed my cousin over a fake, backyard wrestling title and probably destroyed our friendship. And then like it happened on this huge stage for Montreal. It was mind blowing to me.
That's so fantastic that he hung around for a while. Hopefully nothing happened to any of his brothers or anything while they were trying to wrestle still in your company after he left. But I guess, I feel like we barely kind of scratched the surface here. But
we blow through time limits, man. I got time. PTBN, we go between the sheets. This is like a quarter of a between the sheets. So if you want to add John, we can add John. I'm okay with it.
Oh, no. We try to keep it just to, I guess, be different. We want to be the podcast who sticks. Okay. We don't have a hard and fast, but we do have one final closing question, which is to anyone who's just a fan, someone maybe even they're just starting out being a fan of the podcasts or the website or just JT in general. Maybe they're just stalking your Facebook. What would be something that they'd be surprised to know about you? We've hit so much already that I can't imagine, you seem like an open book, but is there some kind of, not even secret, but something that's not 100% out there and maybe doesn't 100% fit your profile of what most people expect from you?
Everything I said about Dan McGinn was false. I hate him. No, it's and one thing, I like yacht rock, but that's pretty well known. That's no, I don't know. Like you said, I'm pretty open, almost to the point sometimes where I worry myself. I feel like I have to pull back. I'm like, if my wife knew like how much I talked about and how open I was, and even, I'm pretty open on Facebook. Like I'll accept a lot of requests from our listeners and stuff. And I always wonder, like, I'm like, do I really think things through? Like I put pictures of my kids on there and stuff, and I'm pretty trusting. So maybe I'm too trusting. I guess one thing is I will never, and I think I have friends that can attest to this. I will never hold a grudge that can't be like solved. I think I can come across as like a real like douche and ball buster on the shows a lot of times, but especially like I'll get people who like, obviously you've heard of Matt Rotella, just listen to the show. I get people like reaching out to me like, you should ease up on Rotella. Like you're really mean to Rotella, like more than one person. And I'm like, Rotella's like one of my best friends. Like I've known him forever. Like he's in on the joke. You know what I mean? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that like, if I'm your friend and you're my friend, no matter whatever happens between us, I'm always willing to just like don't care and move on. I'm not a fan of, I don't say not a fan of confrontation because I am a fan of confrontation because it helps clear the air. I'm not a fan of letting confrontation dictate the way you conduct your relationships or your life. Like if Steve Carino, for example, well, I don't even consider a friend, but if he reached out to us tomorrow, like I would advocate for him to come. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a big fan of like holding grudges because I've seen it on my side, in my family and my wife's family. It's like, who has the energy for this, for these grudges and for these issues and these beefs? It's like, I don't get it. It's just like, do your thing. Like, and that's why I think part of this growing up as like a wrestling fan is instilled this in me. Like, it's such a negative, and it's getting away from that. It's not as much of a negative connotation as it used to be, but to have to hide what you're into or what you like, it's like, just let people do what they want to do. Just be what you want to be and talk about what you want to talk about and watch what you want to watch and, just whatever, like do what you want to do. And I'm just a guy that I love to hang out with my friends. I like to intermingle my friends. I like to, if I got friends that don't know each other, one group from high school, one group from PTV, I like them to meet and be friends. So then we can all hang out. Like that's all I really want. I want, my kids to be really happy and healthy. And I want a big group of friends to all get together and hang out and just do my thing. That's about it.
All right. Like I said, you come across as a pretty open book, but I think it's also interesting to hear people, on the side of it where maybe you second guess putting so much of that out there.
I'll say this. How about this too? No matter doing all this and all the acting and everything else I've done, it's still a lot of nerves to get up and speak in public. And once I'm up there, I'm okay. But the build, like, still like big time, like nerves and butterflies. And I guess to me, I try and look at that as something I've overcome to get up there. And this podcast stuff's helped me so much, like in my real life, like job and stuff, because I've gotten, one of the things I get a lot of credit for in my line of work is like, oh, you do really well in meetings and talking to people. And it's all from like doing this podcast and talking to random people. Like I never imagined like, oh, I'm just going to interview JJ Dillon. You know what I mean? Like I would have been really fucking nervous like 10 years ago to even talk to any wrestlers, let alone sit and do a podcast with the Kevin Kelly, who, I mean, I grew up, whatever, listening to him in WWF. So it's like crazy to me. It's mind blowing. But I still get those nerves. And, my advice to anyone is don't, if you're in that situation, and public speaking is it's so nerve wracking. I mean, like what's the old Jerry Seinfeld bit? Public speaking is like the number one fear, over death. So people would rather at a funeral be in the casket than be given the eulogy.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's nerve wracking, but I would just say it's one of those things that if you're in a job or a position where you could better yourself because you have to get in front of people and speak, is just do reps, get on, do these kinds of things in your life. And, it'll help big time. It's helped me and it'll help a lot of people. I think if you just take the time to even if no one's listening, even if 15 people are listening, even if you're doing the NBA team podcast and no one's listening, it's like, just do your thing and, whatever, it helps, whatever, and do what you enjoy. Like, don't worry about downloads and clicks and listens unless you're doing it for a living and you want to make a lot of money off of it. Just do it for what you love doing. And that's what I love about Place to Be Nation. I just said this to someone, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling on, but I said this to someone on Scott Keith's blog today. Like, one of my big pride points of Place to Be Nation is that we've offered this platform of written pieces as well as all these podcasts, which I would put up our quality and quantity of podcasts against anything. And we don't ask, we're not looking to make money. We want people to hear it. We want to drive downloads, but we're not doing it for that. We're doing it because we like doing it. And that's why I love like Titans of Wrestling and stuff. Like those guys just want to fucking talk 1980s Bob Backlund. I mean, and Kelly doing the MSG show. Like that's he wants to talk MSG and he's talking MSG, and you guys doing This Week in Wrestling. You want to talk, Japan and New Japan and Lucha, and like you just want to talk about that stuff and you just go out and do it. Like that's what this era to me is about. It's like the ability to self-create these forms of media, and whether 10 people listening or thousands of people listening, do it. Just do what you want to do, and you have the ability and the tools to make it happen. So, and always hustle. Just always hustle.
Hustle, loyalty, and respect, right? That's what it
just
comes
hustle.
down.
I'm a big fan of it.
All right, well, JT, thank you so much for being on. Just amazing. Kind of blew through an hour really quickly here, just talking to you about everything. Definitely plan to have you back. The only thing I'm committed to is not having Dylan Hales be the first 2-time guest. So you're definitely back in the pool.
And he only went an hour, Dylan?
Oh yeah, we kept it under an hour, and we talked about a lot of really crazy stuff. Well, he might have got it right around an hour, but we didn't go much.
Invitational? Did that come up?
No, this was, actually, we may have mentioned it here.
I'm sure it came up at least once.
Yeah, exactly. Can't help it. But either way, you're definitely in the pool for being a second-time guest sometime soon. Obviously, I mean, I think if anybody's listening to this, they're probably pretty familiar with your work. But if you want to put it out there, what you got going on, the Place to Be podcast. I don't know I don't even know if you have Twitter, if I follow you or not.
Yeah, I run pretty much the Place to Be Nation Twitter. Me and Jason Greenhouse pretty much run that thing. So I use that as my Twitter account. I used to have a personal one, but I got sick of switching back and forth. So all the annoying retweets about like Providence basketball and Yankee shit, like that's all me. So you can blame me for that. So follow us on Twitter, definitely on all our Facebook pages. We have a great live chats group on Facebook where we just, it's all we have 200 of us in there, all our listeners and members of the staff that just sit in there and talk wrestling. And we have a chat message group that goes on as well. There's about 45 of us in there. It's just an ongoing chat. So if you're listening to this and you like just talking wrestling with random people, we can add you into that. Every week, multiple written pieces. So Scott and I are doing our Vintage World Refresh written series where we're cleaning up all of our old podcasts, all of our pay-per-view reviews. We got up to WrestleMania 12, then we went back and did all the Saturday Night's main events, and now we're actually doing every Raw. So we're into like March of '93. So those are up every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm part of the Network Adventure, where a group of us are watching every item every show on the WWE Network in chronological order. It can be a task. We're in this stretch of TNT that finally broke Chad Campbell right now, and he quit because they're rough to sit through. Seinfeld the Rewatch series every Friday. That is like one of my biggest pride points because I've taken guys that are not great with commitment, and they've all been fantastic. My best friend in the world, Andrew Flanagan, not a great guy when it comes to keeping up with commitments and seeing things through, and he has committed and done every one of these. We're into season 7 now. I think we've gone on for 2 years in August. So that's up every Friday, and we're getting close to the end. It's funny because Jordan Duncan was like, "Oh, I feel like we're getting close to the end." I'm like, "Buddy, we've got like another year still of this." Or he was saying, "We still got another year of this to go," but it feels like we're getting near the end. And then podcast-wise, Place to Be podcast. Right now, Scott and I are doing weekly again, while Kevin Kelly's show's on hiatus. We're hoping he'll be back after the summer again with all his stuff with the Ring of Honor and New Japan. We're just taking a little bit of a break. I think he needed it after going 2 years strong. Dangerous Alliance, I'm hoping will be back soon too. Will had a lot going on back at home and traveling, so we took a little break with that too. I love doing that show. Will is awesome, and I got to meet him at WrestleMania this year, which was a bucket list item. So there you go. And then Clotheslines and Headlines, our newest show. We just have 2 in the books, and I love the show. It's me, Steve Willie, and Nate Milton, but we have a lot of guests come on, and we're talking current wrestling. And we cover everything, not just WWE. We're covering Lucha Underground, Ring of Honor, a lot of TNA with all the final deletion stuff going on. So that's every other Wednesday or Thursday that'll be posted. We record on Wednesdays. So if you missed the first 2, go back and listen because Nate alone is awesome, but Steve is great too. So that's it. I think that covers everything.
Yeah, no, that show's so good. I'm already falling in love with that because with you and Nate and Steve, just 3 guys I really, really like already. So having you guys all on the same show has been just fantastic. And I have to give a shout out to my buddy Mario for making the art for that. He made our logo as well, and he made your guys' logo. So he's the man.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it came out way better. Like when I first said it, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be tough to do. That was like a newspaper thing, and then when I saw it, I'm like, yep, we're good. Like, perfect.
Yeah.
All I needed was that draft.
What I thought was so cool about it is I think almost anybody else, if you had said like the clothesline thing, they may have gone like either Stan Hansen or just the most generic guy doing a clothesline ever. But the fact that he went for the JBL is just so fucking perfect. I don't know what it is about knowing that that's JBL that really makes it for me, but I love it.
And the way it's mid, like, lariat, where he's like on the way down, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, a lesser man would have just done like a guy standing with his arm out. Like,
yeah, exactly.
He got that illustration of like really clobbering a guy.
Yeah, it's so perfect. I love that thing. Love that show. Love all your shows, honestly. So I'm excited for Dangerous Alliance to come back and all that. So once again, thanks, Justin, so much. And I guess we'll see everybody next week.